The Carolina Hurricanes come in as one of the NHL's best team to the 2022-2023 season. They had one of the NHL's best known off seasons. This is common knowledge amongst the hockey community. But is it correct? I'm going to answer that question today as we go through our off-season breakdown and preview. I'm going to walk you through the Carolina Hurricanes coaching situation, their team additions, their team subtractions, their draft pick situation, their cap situation, their player contracts. I'm going to grade their contracts. And finally, I'm going to tell you what their expectations are heading into the 2022-2023 season. And I'm going to let you know how I think they did this offseason. We're going to finally answer that question. And spoiler alert, it might not be exactly what you think it's going to be, so stay tuned to the end of the video. The first place we always start when we're talking hockey is with the coach, and there is almost no better coach in the NHL than Rod the Bod Brind'Amour. The Carolina Hurricanes get an A+ rating for this stud behind the bench. He brings his work ethic, his dedication on how to play the game the right way, as well as an ability to communicate to players and get the most out of his team. He is incredible on the defensive side of the puck. He has shown an ability to be able to generate one of the best penalty kills in the NHL, as well as serviceable scoring. But the Carolina Hurricanes, in order to win the Stanley Cup, are going to have to take a step forward in today's NHL, and they're going to have to deliver scoring at a better rate than they did last year if they want to contend for Lord Stanley's Cup. So we know they got the right man behind the bench. Let's go ahead and talk about the additions, subtractions, and drafts that are going to help this team go forward next year. Starting with the fun pieces, it's the additions, and the Carolina Hurricanes are getting a grade of A from me for this one. They bring in Max Pacioretty for literally a water bottle from the Vegas Golden Knights. So the Carolina Hurricanes fleece Kelly McCrimmon and the Vegas Golden Knights for a prize asset in Max Pacioretty, and this is one of the NHL's best goal scorers. He brings a GSVA, game score value add, of 3.2, one of the best in the NHL up front. 19 goals for, 18 assists, 37 points. When Patches is on his game, he's one of the most lethal scorers in the game. No, he's not up there with an Ovechkin or a Matthews. Those guys are in categories all on their own. But Max Pacioretty brings one of the best natural scoring punches to any team he wants to play with. And outside of Ondrej Kase, I'd argue that's what the Carolina Hurricanes have been missing most. They also add Brent Burns into this. And yes, Burnsy may be older. He's got 3 years left on his deal, but he is still a premier defenseman in the NHL. Actually, he ranked within my top 30 defensemen. If you go check out that video after this one, he comes in with 54 points total on the year, 10 goals, and a 1.5 GSVA. Great addition on the back end, as well as a locker room leader and a pure stud when it comes to the beard. The guy is an absolute monster among boys at 6'5". Ondrej Kase. Kase ends up coming in with 27 points this year, over from the Leafs, previously to the Bruins, a GSVA of 1.1. Perfect depth player for the Carolina Hurricanes. If he can keep that old hat rack of his brain away from concussions, he has had a just unfortunate train wreck of a career in terms of hits to the head and concussions. But if he can stay away from those, he is a hyper productive player. I watched him almost every game with the Leafs last year. I think this is a fantastic addition. I think he plays into your middle six beautifully. I think he can play in your top six in a pinch for injury, but he likely belongs somewhere on the third line. So beautiful add-in. And then they go in and they add in a couple depth pieces such as Dylan and Deangelo here. These guys don't even rank for GSVA. Not much to talk about here. Ryan Deangelo, remember when this guy was an absolute gem of an acquisition for the Blue Jackets and their playoff push? He is now completely fallen off the map. I don't expect either of these guys to likely compete for a roster spot of any consequence with the Canes, but hey, maybe Dylan can go ahead and kick tires there on the fourth line. We'll just have to wait and see, but I do not expect much from Deangelo. Now moving on to subtractions, you're going to notice this is a grade of D, so yikes. Why do I give it a D? Because there's nothing you can really do to prevent guys like this from moving. Contracts are always escaping, but at the end of the day, you got to say you're losing better players than you're bringing in. Maybe. Let's go ahead and talk about it, but this hurts. There's no other way to say it, but this hurts. So the additions are an A, the subtractions are a D. It's going to work out. And you know what? Sometimes playing the offseason when you're a top team, and Canes fans, if you've never heard this before, sometimes it's about mitigating the damage loss, because every time you're a top team in the NHL, you're going to lose more than you're going to be able to add. But let's talk about them. Tony Deangelo is obviously the biggest pain point at a 3.8 GSVA, but it is well documented documented that Deangelo is not loved in the locker room, or at the very least, if you don't believe me when I say that, he is controversial enough that there is enough smoke around the player as a person, and there are enough question marks around him within the locker room and the attitude he brings to be questionable at best. So when I say there's smoke, there's fire, I fully believe it. You don't have to believe it, but I do think Tony Deangelo, the hockey player, hyper talented. Tony Deangelo, the man, massive question marks behind his name. My personal opinion of it, it's likely true. I would prefer to have a guy like Burns on my team. 10 goals, 41 assists, and 51 points, and one of the premier defensemen in the NHL. Still going to be hard to replace. You've heard me say this on this channel many times. There is hard work, there is work ethic, but talent does trump all. However, when it comes to pushing a cup, having a guy like Burnsy has talent and locker room leadership never fully removes the sting, but it helps. But Tony Deangelo, 3.8 GSVA versus Burns at 1.5. Nino Niederreiter, this is a guy with no question marks around his locker room presence, one of the best contributors for the Carolina Hurricanes. Previous to that, to the Minnesota Wild, 44 points, 24 goals. Look, we talked about Patches coming in and being a goal scorer. You're losing 24 in Niederreiter. That is rough. Middle six player, second line guy, 20 assists, 2.7 GSVA, and then you go ahead and lose Vincent Trocheck as well. Look, I wouldn't have signed Trocheck to his deal either. The New York Rangers loved it. I love what Trocheck is. I love Trocheck as a player, but I thought the term and length of term he got from New York was banana sandwich. So I understand why you don't want to go ahead and re-sign him, but it's still going to hurt losing 21 goals, 30 points, 30 assists, and 51 points in a GSVA of 1.8. And then finally, you lose 6, 7, maybe number 5 defenseman in Ian Cole, 19 points, 1.1 GSVA. And remember, a 0 GSVA is a replaceable NHL player. So you end up losing a lot of cheese there, a lot of dineros, a lot of contribution to your team in those 4 players. And it's not totally offset by those additions that are brought in. You also lose trade deadline acquisition Max Domi, who at this point in his career is just totally a replaceable level player. Yes, he gets points, 39 last year. Hopefully he ends up finding a little bit of his game back. Now, Steve Lorentz, he's also gone as well too. And again, role player, ends up moving into the lineup, but nothing you can write home about. I don't think this is a massive subtraction. Moving over to the draft, I'm actually going to give them a B+. Now, they may not have had a first round draft pick, and that's pretty common for a team that's pushing for the cup, but they end up with pick 60 and pick 71. So their second and their third round pick were nice. And what I like that they did in this draft is when you don't have high capital, why don't you zig when the market's zagging? And they drafted a lot of Russians. Russians were plummeting in the rankings, so they may actually get a first round talent out of one of these second or third round picks that they end up having there. And I'm not even going to try saying the name of either of them. You know, I butcher them to the best of my ability, but you can see them there on the screen. So I like where they went. And then the rest of their players that are picked in rounds 4 through 7, and there was a whole bunch of them, 5 to be exact. Every round from 3 to 7 is about equal. It's likely a 20% chance to be an impact player in the NHL playing 100 games or more. The more darts you have in those rounds, the better. The science is not proven any way that any teams are better or worse than others at picking within those rounds. So it's a bit of a lottery. So throw as many darts as you can at the board here. And I like the fact that they ended up throwing 6 darts from round 3 to round 7 and 5 darts from round 4 to round 7. That's why I give them a B+. I don't expect any of these guys to contribute next year, but it is always good to have these players in the system because statistically speaking, 1 or 2 of these players now should be a full-time contributor for the Hurricanes in the future. So that brings us to our final off-season grade. For me, it's a B. I don't have these guys as one of the best off seasons out there, but B is for damn good. I know I couldn't think of a better word that starts with B other than banana sandwich, and I say it way too much. B is a very good grade for a team as good as the Carolina Hurricanes for all the losses that they had to endure due to contracts and the reality of how talented their players are. Not a huge deal. So not a bad off season for the Hurricanes, but I'm not going to send them off as one of the best in the NHL. However, stick around to the end because if you're a Canes fan, you're still going to like where I have their expectations next year. Now let's talk about the Hurricanes cap space. They're in a pretty good scenario here right now. Head over to Cap Friendly. They have $1.8 million available and they've used $80 million. So this should spell the story as to why these guys couldn't sign those contracts that they signed. So they did a good job managing for the cap, but we don't just manage the cap, we manage talent as well. So it is a balance, but Don Waddell did a reasonable job keeping the Hurricanes under a cap as well as making draft picks. When we go ahead and take a look at their core roster, remember a core player for me is anyone with 3 or more years left on their deal deal. Impending player is someone you're likely to sign with 1 to 2 years left. Rental is someone you're likely to not sign with 1 year left, and an ugly contract is an ugly contract. So let's go ahead and pull them up, shall we? Core players, there's only 4 right now. Yes, I know there's more players important to this team, but only 4 players with 3+ years. Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi, Slavin, man. It's Jacob Slavin. Just get it right. Jacob Slavin and Brent Burns. So those are your core guys right now, but there's a lot in the impending category that I expect a deal to be done with. Sebastian Aho, one of the best players in the NHL at his position. Max Pacioretty. Will he stay in Carolina or will he not? He always wants to be on a contender. Carolina is a great place to do that. Jordan Staal, one of the most, if not the most effective third line center in the NHL. Teuvo Teravainen, a beautiful middle six player. Martinook, Jarvis, who is obviously the future of this team. We normally don't talk about rookies, but this guy's going to get a deal. It's going to be big. Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, these 2 guys only have 2 years left on their deal, but they're cornerstones there on the back end. They're some of the best 3-4 pairing defensemen in the NHL. They may not make my top 30 in terms of elite, but they are definitely a damn good player and an important piece to winning a Stanley Cup, and they fill in beautifully in that second pair, and both of them can fill up first line minutes if there is an injury to the top line guys. Then you have Ethan Bear, who I still think is a future staple defenseman for this team, and I go ahead and say, is Coughlin? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to throw a question mark there. The guys who are rentals right now, look, Fast may actually be able to move up into the impending list. He is a very good third line player for this team, but I'm not too sure. You're going to run out of cap space eventually looking at all those players. Kasha is another guy that you'd love to keep, but again, could run out of cap space. Pettersson, Anderson, and Rantanen. Okay, let's stop here. Jake Gardiner is there. I still think he's a rental. I don't think he gets re-signed, but he could be productive moving up into the roster. But Anderson and Ranta, I put them here because I'm not sure. There's only a year left. I think for sure Freddie Anderson's going to be looking for a bag of money. Why wouldn't he? Goalies always do it. He's going to play out to the middle of next year, and either he's going to get a big bag of money extended with the Carolina Hurricanes, or he's going to walk to free agency. That may mean he may come back to Carolina. He may not, but I'm putting him in rental because I think there is some big question marks with whether or not he re-signs. And same with Antti Ranta. Antti Ranta is a fantastic backup, but again, over 30 years old, this guy's going to want to get paid if he can get paid, and Carolina has no ugly contracts in my opinion. So that's the breakdown of the core. Let's go over to Cap Friendly so you can see what I mean. First thing to point out here is take a look at the next 3 years. They are still set up in the draft. They actually have all 3 first-round picks over the next 3 years. They have 4 second-round picks, and they have 3 third-round picks. I love that these guys don't fully give up on their picks. I think you never want to trade more than 1 singular first-round pick. You don't want to trade 2 years out, in my opinion, so I love what Don Waddell has done to manage that. It's worth pointing out. But take a look at these contracts here. You can see Svechnikov is locked in as a cornerstone. Jesperi Kotkaniemi is locked in as a cornerstone. He needs to step up and play better. There's no question about that. Teuvo Teravainen, impending 5.4. Will he stay with the team? I hope he does. He's going to be young still, young-ish at 29 when he's done. Then you got Jordan Martinook. He definitely could still be a productive bottom 4 player. And Ondrej Kase, he is only 26 years old, so I'd like him to be re-signed as well. Then you take a look at the defenseman. Jacob Slavin, again, this is a cornerstone player. He's got 3 years left. After this 3 years, this guy's going to sign a bag of money, $8 to $11 million. Brent Burns is going to likely retire here. I'll be surprised if he plays out his whole career. Brady Shea and Brett Pesce, these guys could be due some raises into the $7 million range or maybe the $6 million range in 2 years. But for now, the window is open. And then you got Ethan Bear and Dylan Coughlin locked in as RFAs. I don't see Coughlin not getting re-signed as an RFA, so I think he should be impending. That's why I have the question mark. But you never really know with all the defensemen these guys have and all the prospects these guys have. Antti Ranta and Frederick Anderson are only locked in for next year. Great deal on these 2 goalies. Probably the best goaltending tandem in terms of value added money. And then Jake Gardiner, I am told he should be healthy enough to sign back in next year and move in. This adds to these defensemen up here. And then we go ahead and we take a look at some of the people who are within the system. They have a few prospects that are kicking tires, but again, we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time talking about these guys. I really hope Stelio Matheos ends up cracking that lineup. I coached his little brother. Shout out to the Matheos family. All of them are fantastic human beings. We're all cheering for Stelio to finally crack that lineup. So we'll end up seeing what goes on with these players, but that will be for another video. So that then takes us over to our contract grades. Head over to theathletic.com, take a look, sign up, subscribe. We're not sponsored by them, but you want to read these articles by Dom Lucian. It's the best in the game. He has graded them out as a B+ for contracts. What does he do? He goes ahead and takes a look at their their contribution as a player versus the price of their contract. That looks at advanced analytics as well as standard. What it's telling us right now is Ondrej Kase is your best deal on the books up at front. Pacioretty gets a B+, Aho gets a B+, Teravainen gets a B, Fast gets a B, Kase gets a B-, Deangelo gets a B-, but it doesn't matter. He's not going to make the team anyway, in my opinion. Stahl's a C+, and it's not because he's not a productive player. It's because he's playing on the third line for $6 million left. That's just hanging out from his last deal. That happens to all players who age up like he has, but he's still very productive for the team. Then we look at the defensemen. Obviously, Jacob Slavin is the best contract on this team. 5.3 is a steal for a top 10 defenseman in the NHL. Pesce comes in at a B, and then everybody else comes in at a B, so they get it done as a B-level team, and I think the additions of guys like Pacioretty and that will only help. And we don't include guys like Necas because as of the time of this video, he hadn't re-signed, but he's re-signed now, so you can go ahead and see that updated on The Athletic. And Seth Jarvis doesn't count because he's an ELC, and they have no dead money. So finally, what are our expectations? Well, before we talk about those, I want to go ahead and thank my buddy Mick. He's a giant Carolina Hurricanes fan. This video is brought to you by him, as well as the other members here in our executive suite. Thank you so much to our members here on the coach's staff, and you can join down below by hitting the join button. But if you want to subscribe and help us out for free, the subscribe button down there, always free. Go ahead, hit that thumbs up. Help spread the love of this video. We appreciate you all being here. Now, what are the expectations of the Hurricanes? For Coach Ryan D, it's simple. Stanley Cup Finals. I was actually going to say cup or bust here. This team is so good and has been so good for so long that at this point, I'm telling you, win the cup or get off the pot. That is the expectation for me. I want you to let me know down below, Canes fans, if you agree with that. I don't just want to see progress. I want to see a Stanley Cup final run at this point. You have every hole plugged that needs to be plugged. Some really good players have exited, but some pretty good players have come back in. The risk to miss these expectations is high, though. It is very hard to make the Stanley Cup Finals, and the East is a slaughterhouse. You're going to have to get through New York, Pittsburgh, then you're going to have to cross over to the Atlantic, and who knows, between the Florida teams, Boston, Toronto, the up-and-coming Wings, Senators, and a whole bunch of other teams in your own division, including guys like the Capitals. I mean, it is just, it's absolutely a killing field in the East this year, but I still think this team is built to go, and you have to go this year because Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta's contract, they're up, they're over. 2023 and beyond, I still see this team as a playoff contender, even if they have to adjust the goalies. They have so much depth within their system of B-level prospects, maybe not a lot of A-level, but B-level prospects in their system. They got Seth Jarvis on an entry-level contract. This team is excellent at managing their cap scenario, and they have one of the best coaches in the league. They will always be a playoff contender in the next short term, meaning, the next, let's call it 2 to 4 years. Maybe that's medium term for you, but they will sit as a playoff contender. Their window isn't fully closing, but this is probably the best chance they've had as opposed to last year. Last year was the best, but unfortunately Anderson didn't make it back to win a Stanley Cup. So that's where I have these guys sat. Hurricanes fans, tell me if I got it right. Tell me if I got it wrong. I'm really excited to watch this team next year. I am super pumped about the prospect of the Hurricanes and who's on it. They're just fun hockey to watch. So thank you all for being here. Check out our same video about the Boston Bruins as well too. We went to a full in-depth breakdown of them, as well as check out our list of our top 30 defensemen, and we'll catch you tomorrow.